Hello, this is Jonathan Schofield, and this is my code review for the CS499 project. The code is initially from CS250 and was written in Java. So the code essentially creates a slideshow of the top 5 travel destinations that a person would want to go on. And as you can see, it will run. Let me pull it over. And there is the user interface as next and previous, and it will loop through. The colors are not the greatest. The UI definitely needs some work. So the enhancements that I will be making to this project are redesigning the UI, reprogramming the entire thing in C#, using most likely the WPF graphical interface framework, and I will also be formulating a sorting algorithm so that the travel destination is going to be sorted not just by rating but also by name, and I will be adding user login and the ability for a user to favorite different travel destinations. And I will be attaching a SQL database to the back end, which will be feeding the front end with the information. So we're just looking at the initial application right now. If we pull up, so here we have the code review checklist. So initially, does the code completely and correctly implement the design? No, it does not, because we are going to be redoing the user interface and adding elements like a login and a favorites page showing the favorited travel destinations. So it doesn't completely implement the design correctly. It does correctly do it, however, at least for Java, with the exception of the images, as you see here, and the descriptions, which are hard-coded into the application. Not necessarily a good thing to do, because the destinations can change over time. So that is why we'll be implementing a database later. Is the code well structured, consistent in style, and consistently formatted? It is consistent. Broken up into the functions that are then used to manipulate the UI. It is essentially directly manipulating the UI and declaring the variables at the beginning before the functions. And then has the main function at the end that then starts the whole application. So any uncalled for or unneeded procedures or unreachable code. There is not. Looks to be in order. All the code looks like it is reachable. The variables are all used at one point or another within the code. Leftover stubs, test routines, no, there actually aren't any test routines. So testing might be a good thing to do with the recreated application. Any code can be replaced by calls to external reusable components or library functions. That goes back to the images and the descriptions down here. That can definitely be rewritten so that it's not hard-coded into the application itself, so that it can be more easily manipulated in the future. That also kind of goes into repeating code that can be condensed. Once you hard code that in here, you don't need the repeating if-else statements. You can kind of simplify it. Storage use efficient. Relatively efficient. It's possible it could be more efficient if the JPEGs were converted to binary instead of being separate resources within a different folder. But otherwise, I think storage space is fairly efficient. Symbolics used rather than magic number constants or string constants. Any module is excessively complex should be restructured or split into multiple routines. The functions seem to be fairly simplistic, simplified and broken up into their basic components. The previous button, next button, and that manipulates the slide panes for the cards and the card text. So it's broken up fairly well. So the documentation for the code is sparse. There is documentation. There are comments. However, they're very sparse comments, and there are sections like here where comments are there aren't really any comments in this section. There's minimal comment here. So it's not very descriptive comments. There are comments, but they're not very descriptive. So when it's rewritten, it's going to have more descriptive comments that really allow the user to easily, or the programmer to easily look at the comments and see what that code is accomplishing without having to really dig into it. All variables properly defined with meaningful, consistent, clear names. There are certain variables like I, right there, int I, which doesn't really have a name. Like, it's just int I. It's not describing anything. Could say that means, what's the image number? See, it's hard to tell just by the name what it represents. So that definitely would need to be fixed. Again up here, but this is being used as an iterator, so that's not quite as bad. That's just being used to iterate. Otherwise, these names are fairly descriptive for what they are. And every variable looks like it is used at some point within the application. I don't see any floating point numbers that are being used. It's all integers. When it does use variables, it's integer variables, integers and strings. There's no rounding errors. So rounding doesn't take place. So the loops look correct. You have a for loop here, looping through less than or equal to 5 times. It goes through. And initializes the slides with the text and the images. The indexes are initialized in the for loop, and it continues correctly. And the code does avoid manipulating the index within the loop, so it doesn't manipulate the I value within here. So that is good. So there's no testing for file bounds. That is actually a big thing in this application. Technically, when you're going into here and you're getting resources, there should be try statements in case those resources do not exist, especially for the images. You need to have try and catch statements so that exceptions can be caught if those resources do not exist. So that will have to be implemented into the remade version of this application. Otherwise, garbage collection is done automatically in Java, and it does look like it is done correctly in this application, because it is done automatically. C# as well, it will be done automatically, but we do have to watch out for arrays and any kind of lists that are going to be used. In the remade application, we will use potentially some lists for sorting algorithm. So we will have to look out for that in the remade application. But in this version, everything's hard-coded in. There's no list. The main thing we have to watch out for is the try-catch blocks with the resources, and making sure that the resources, if they don't exist, the exception is handled correctly. The remade version of this application will be much more complex. I am planning on having a user login and the database in the back end that will handle both the user information, username, passwords, as well as the travel information. The login will use the hashing algorithm to ensure that the password is stored correctly within the database. Excuse me. And so, another thing that I have noticed is that the if-else statements do not have a else default clause at the end. As you can see, it's if, else if, or in the end, but there's no default else. So if it goes through all of these and does not match any of these values, it will return null, most likely. And so there needs to be a default clause at the end to prevent that from happening. It will return blank. Actually, it will return a blank string. So yes, there needs to be a default clause at the end to prevent that from happening. Also, potentially we'll need a try block for getting the get description and the resize here in case it doesn't match what it should be. So yes. So as a recap, the software design and engineering portion, the application will be rewritten in C# using WPF for the graphical interface. And redesigning the user interface to be nicer looking and to have additional features such as a user login and a favorites page. Algorithms and data structure. There will be sorting algorithms added for sorting the information once it is acquired from the database and displaying it in the user interface, and allowing the user to change how the travel destinations are sorted through the user interface. And then the database, it will be using a SQL database on the back end and connected to the C# application, most likely using a RESTful API in order to send the information back and forth from the database to the application. And when that is completed, then the application should be more functional and better looking and much easier to use. So that is what I will be doing for this project in CS 499.